12.6 Conclusion, Chapter 12 Conclusion. Chapter 12 is Instrumental Variables Regression. From the humble start of estimating how much less butter people will buy if its price rises, IV methods, or four methods, have evolved into a general approach for estimating regressions. When one or more variables are correlated with the error term, instrumental variables regression uses the instruments to isolate variation in the endogenous regressors that is uncorrelated with the error in the regression of interest. This is the first stage of two-stage least squares. And this in turn permits estimation of the effect of interest in the second stage of two-stage least squares. Successfully IV for regression requires valid instruments, that is, instruments that are both relevant, not weak, and exogenous. If the instruments are weak, then the TSLS estimator can be biased, even in large samples, and statistical inferences based on TSLS t-statistics and confidence intervals can be misleading. Fortunately, when there is a single endogenous regressor, it is possible to check for weak instruments simply by checking the first stage big F statistic. If the instruments are not exogenous, that is, if one or more instruments are correlated with the error term, the TSLS estimator is inconsistent. If there are more instruments than endogenous regressors, instrument exogeneity can be examined by using the big J statistic to test the over-identifying restrictions. However, the core assumption that there are at least as many exogenous instruments as there are endogenous regressors cannot be tested. It is therefore incumbent on both the empirical analyst and the critical reader to use their own understanding of the empirical application to evaluate whether this assumption is reasonable. The interpretation of big I, big V, or I believe to be for regression, as a way to exploit known exogenous variation in the endogenous regressor can be used to guide the search for potential instrumental variables in a particular application. This interpretation underlies much of the empirical analysis in the area that goes under the broad heading of program evaluation, in which experiments or quasi-experiments are used to estimate the effect of programs, policies, or other interventions on some outcome measure. A variety of additional issues arises in those applications. For example, the interpretation of IV results when, as in the cardiac catheterization example, different patients might have different responses to the same treatment. These and other aspects of empirical program evaluation are taken up in Chapter 13.